We started in 1925 as a full-service contractor, which was appliance repair, residential, which didn't amount to much these days, and small commercial work. I don't have a lot of history up until the 60s on the company. I came here in 1967 as a first-year apprentice. Left for 3 years to finish my apprenticeship, came back in 1971. During the 60s, I know Chula Vista Electric kind of expanded. I think Jim touched on it. That was one of the major times of the United States. We had a lot of industrial work going on. Chula Vista Electric built 2 high-rise buildings downtown. We built the Simpra building in 1967, this building I started on. And we built the Home Tower, which is another 25-story high-rise located on Broadway. These were good jobs for Chula Vista Electric. I think Chula Vista at that time was looking for where its feet were going to really stick and looking at all different areas. We worked with the Navy on a desal plant. It was built down here in the South Bay. And as soon as we got that up and running, and you can imagine, based on mechanical relay technology, this had to be just an amazing feat to get this thing working. They packed it all up, shipped it off to Guantanamo for the Navy. And I don't know how long it lasted down there, but I heard it was quite a while. We gave up the residential side in the early 70s. The industrial side was picking up steam. We started a high voltage program. I kind of headed that up when I got in. I took a lot of training on high voltage, maintenance, repair, and new installations. And we became quite adept at high voltage. And I don't know, I know some of you here in the room, I think that's all they thought we did was high voltage. We were doing so much between the early work in the 50s, by the mid 70s, the high voltage systems were wearing out, cable systems were gone. We had a tremendous run with that up through the 80s. We've always had our fingers in a lot of pies. The owner that bought the company in 1972, very smart man. He was there was nothing he wouldn't try. And if somebody asked him if you could do that, he said, "Sure, that's all we've ever done. This one and one more will make 2." So that's it was a great philosophy. I've tried to keep that going. Sometimes you get in a little over your head, but you can always hire that out. And I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer at times, so I have to do a lot of hiring at times. Throughout the 80s and 90s, we got into fiber optics and structured cabling in the early stages. There were several TV manufacturing plants in town. We were into those. There were printed circuit board manufacturers in town. We built 2 of those. That was before the EPA kind of shut all that work down. The space race was going on in the early 80s, and we took part in that. We did some work up at Lawrence Livermore Labs. I was doing some high voltage work up there, and I had no idea what we were doing. They didn't tell us anything, kept us in separate rooms. I asked one of the guys that was in the room with me, I said, "What does this do?" And he says, "You don't know?" And I said, "I have no idea." He says, "Well, then you don't need to know." Did my work and went home. That was all I needed to do. The early 90s, 92, there were 4 of us that worked for Chula Vista for many, many years, had the opportunity to take it over and buy it. We did that. The old owner was a crafty son of a gun. He saw recession coming in the early 90s that we didn't see. So he got his and got out, and we were kind of left with this empty bag, and we went, what do we do now? You know, we're electricians, we're not businessmen, we don't know what we're doing. So we struggled through. In 1993, we bought another company in Orange County. It was basically a small Chula Vista Electric company. It was called Pacific Industrial Electric, some of you may know it. One of the owners, one of the 4 of us went up and ran that, and they're in business today. We separated 3 years ago, and Fred is still in charge of that group. The solar systems, PV systems that we started those in the late 90s, early 2000s. We did 14 systems here in town for the County of San Diego. We did several on the libraries, several libraries around town, and some of the correctional centers, the Vista Jail, South County Jail. We did three of those. We had an opportunity in early 2000 to get into wind farms. They weren't farms, they were wind ranches. But we did 3 in San Clemente Island, 3 turbines. We did 4. We put them in the middle of the South Atlantic on an island that the British own, but the Air Force uses. It's called Ascension Island. And we put 3 up at Guantanamo. Guantanamo base is run strictly off diesel fuel, and it was killing them. The fuel prices started to go. They put these turbines up. They still have to have a ship at standby full of oil, but it did alleviate some of their problems. This kind of got us into the alternative energy market, and we have done substation work, we've done all kinds of other work, but the alternative energy is really what we see as necessary for the future. We took a different tack than Southern. Southern is very much on the forefront of this. We're more in the energy efficiency market. 2 years ago, I spun another company out. Like I said, I'm very cautious with what I do with Chula Vista Electric, so not wanting to screw that up with something that's not going to work. I joined forces with an HVAC contractor and a major general contractor, and we're looking at the energy efficiency market as developers or not an ESCO, I don't want to say that, but we want to just kind of develop this market. We're just getting into it where it's starting to break loose a little bit, and I think that's going to be, we can put, well, it started to drive construction into Chula Vista Electric and the mechanical contractors' pockets, and we think that's going to happen. We've picked up some work in Imperial Valley with a hospital. They were just destroyed in an earthquake a year ago last Easter. Some of you may have read about that. It destroyed their data center. It really wasn't an alternative energy issue, but the team put together a package where we built them a temporary portable data center. It's on wheels. We were up against HP, Chevron, several other players that were bidding on this. We kind of looked outside the box. How do you get past OSHPD, which is the occupational safety directors for hospital work? Very tough field to play in because you have to pass their rules. They set some pretty high standards. We ended up buying a old MRI trailer that we found in Alaska, gutted it, put a new data center in that, put a chiller on the outside of it, and drove it down there and hooked them up there at 40-degree temperature inside now, and they're fully running. So those are the kind of things. We kind of look outside the box. We've done that for 40 years that I know of, and we just keep looking at that box and seeing how we can get to the outside walls. Right now we're looking at, we are looking at PV systems and wind, but with that comes a new field. When the sun doesn't shine here or the wind quits blowing, what are those systems going to do? Well, there is technology coming that's going to be battery energy systems that will back that up. It's battery storage systems. We're looking at that. We're looking at demand response and demand aggregation. That is, Jim touched on that. With those two things, if you can control it and you can save energy, you can sell that energy. I think Jim spoke to that. The thing is, you can sell that energy for a lot more than you can buy energy. And I think the average kilowatt hour here in San Diego is 14 to 26 cents a kilowatt hour. Once you hit your demand and if you get the utility going over their peak power, not only do they bring those peakers on, they have to go to the grid and buy on the open market power to feed your building. If you're saving energy underneath your demand level, you can sell off those extra kilowatts. And it goes $100 an hour. If they may have to go out on the grid, depending on what's going on in the rest of the country, they may have to spend up to $300 a kilowatt hour. Well, they don't like that. So they'll buy yours a little cheaper, but you can still make some pretty good money on it. Those are the things that we're looking at. Again, following Jim, that's a tough speech. The best energy is not using energy as far as being as a savings. There are 4 basic sources of energy: coal, natural gas, nuclear, and renewables. And renewables encompasses quite a few. Well, the 5th one is energy efficiency, we feel. For every dollar you spend on energy efficiency, you can raise the value of a building $2 to $3 per square foot. So we're getting into a lot of the commercial real estate people. How can we maximize their buildings? Not only do they make a green building, which they can bring into they can get better clients or clients that want that LEED AP or whatever it is they happen to want, but they can save energy too. So for the equivalent, it's quite a feat. CFLs. Jim talked about residential market with CFLs. We don't do any residential work. We used to. I'm not a big fan of doing residential work for my own reasons, but if every household in the United States would replace 4 100-watt lamps with CFLs, we could save the equivalent of 30 300-megawatt power plants. That is a lot of power. Now, not all of them are going to happen, but it's something to keep in the back of your mind. There's also a new buzzword out now. It's called life cycle costs. When you get into the design builds, I know Brian's into it, Jim's into it, we do some. Life cycle costs is what your building costs over the life of that building, whether it's 20 years, 40 years, whatever it is. If we're finding it a lot with hospitals, state and federal buildings, city buildings, county buildings, people that are going to be in their buildings a long, long time, they have a fixed cost for maintenance, for energy, for that whole time. They're not going to sell that building off as a speculator. So they're going to be there. If we can lower their life cycle costs, if it's a 4% cost for the construction of a building, it's a 6% cost based on a life cycle terms with higher efficiency transformers, lighting controls, HVAC controls. Put those in up front, start saving that energy from day one, not 15 years later convert everything. Your energy costs can drop almost 70%. So we've pushed this to the customers. They're starting to look at it and buy it. We think that's energy efficiency for us, fits our model, our personnel. We don't want to necessarily be the installers of somebody else's work. PV systems, I know Brian and I were talking earlier, they're doing a lot of installations and there's a lot of work out there for him, and that's great. We're kind of on the other side of that. We want to do the energy efficiency work on those buildings that he's putting the PV on.